Good afternoon, everybody. I want to talk to you today from Emmanuel Reformed United Church of Christ. I'm in the sanctuary here, and it is a partly cloudy day, a little bit closer, a little bit moisture in the air up on God's Hill. And I want to talk to you today about something called the tipping point. I wonder if you've ever heard of that term before. When I went out to my car this morning, it was just covered in pollen. And I was wondering 2 or 3 days ago about that, about why my eyes were itchy. I'm very allergic to pollen, and I was wondering why I felt the way I did, and I thought perhaps that I had some eye strain, and it just didn't feel right. And it turns out that the pollen count was up, but I couldn't see it. And it wasn't until I went out this morning to my car and I found that it was covered in pollen. And the pollen had reached a certain tipping point. That there was enough to be seen, not just experienced in the air through breathing through your mouth or through your nose, but there was enough that people could see it, and it was covering my automobile. The tipping point has different names. Talks about people when they get a certain amount of understanding of something, when a particular class in school reaches a particular understanding or mastery of the subject. When you get to the tipping point, it's easier to teach the rest of the class. The percent varies on what exactly happens, what subject you're teaching, and that sort of thing. Same thing, sometimes we call it the domino effect. You know, when we were all kids, we played with dominoes, and we put those up and then knock them over. When you're playing around as a kid, and when you get to a certain level, it seems easier and easier to knock things over. The tipping point works in marketing too. The tipping point back in the 80s, I don't know if you all remember Betamax versus VHS. There was a time when you could go into a video store in the 80s and you had a choice between using Betamax, which was a way you watched movies, versus VHS, and which one was going to win out, which one was going to win its market share. And when VHS became the more popular one, there reached a tipping point and people stopped making Betamax. And so you might be saying, okay, so what does that have to do with a daily spirit lift? Well, I think theology and life, the spiritual life, is also has to deal with a tipping point. What would happen if every day Christians spent a few moments a day just being in the presence of God? How would that transform your neighborhood? If you knew that all your neighbors were sitting down and spending some time in prayer, in communing with God, what would the tipping point be? And in this world when there is so much negativity, and it seems like the tipping point only goes one way, and that's towards the negative side of the equation, what would it mean if we were to say that our hope, our understanding, our feelings is that we would create a tipping point of spirituality, a tipping point of people wishing peace and goodwill upon the earth. I think this is what Jesus talks about in John's gospel when he says, I leave peace with you that's not as the world gives. And if we try and seek peace from the world, we probably won't find it. The world is a tricky and funny place for us to exist and to live and move and have our being. But what if you knew that once a day, all your friends in the Christian church sat down? Once a day, all your friends worldwide in your congregation sat down and concentrated on their breathing in through In through the nose and out through the mouth. Breathing in the presence of Christ. Breathing in the peace of Christ. Breathing in wishes of goodwill, health, and wholeness. What would that tipping point look like? What would happen if every person that was within your realm of influence did this and stopped and took a moment to spend in prayer, take a moment to spend in reflection? It doesn't have to be complicated. What would the tipping point look like? How would that improve people's lives? I believe it would. I think it would be important for us to admit that we do things entirely too fast. We even do prayer on the go. How many times have I said, well, I didn't have time to pray today, but I did say a quick prayer before I went into the grocery store or went into the hospital to visit somebody. I said a quick prayer. But did I spend time getting in touch with the author of my being? Did I sit down and pray? Did I sit down and take a moment and cause everything to stop? Breathe in the peace of Christ. Breathe out the love of Christ. Breathe in the Spirit of God. Breathe out communion with each other. What would happen if we reached a tipping point that way? How would the world be different? How would our congregations be different? I don't know that we've ever tried such an experiment. I know that there's all sorts of world records, Guinness Book of World Records for most people drumming at one time or hula hooping or riding unicycles or whatever it is. What about the most people meditating at one time, calling on Christ at one time? What would the tipping point look like? And how are you, my friends, people I care for, people I love very much, how are you going to respond to the tipping point, to encourage us to get to that point where lives are changed, where people are in connection to God, where the culture is changed? I lay it out there as a challenge for you. It's a challenge certainly for me, and it's something I think we need to think about. Imagine millions of people all around the world praying for the peace of Christ and unity with our God. All right. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep watching this space. It's good to be with you. And I hope that we'll see each other soon. All right. Blessings to y'all. And we'll see you. Love you. Miss you. Talk to you soon. Bye.